Joe, Oregon and Ohio State faced off yesterday in what was an outright thriller. Oregon finally, after last year playing Washington twice and losing, Dan Lanning under fire if he can win the big game at Oregon. Beats Ohio State, the number one team in the country, 32-31 in Eugene. Your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, my biggest thing, and I don't want to spend too much time. I think we're going to certainly debate what happened and went through this game, but I have to jump in first by giving Dan Lanning the credit where it is 1,000% deserved. There was a ton of doubt coming into this game by a lot of people. A lot of people, including us on this show, that believed that they did not show us signs that they were going to show up and beat Ohio State. And there were even questions on, is this team ready to take that next step? Can Dan Lanning win the big game when he struggled to do so last year against Washington? Couldn't get over the hump. I argue now that I think that Dan Lanning, by winning this football game, shows us and proves to us he is entering that upper echelon in the premier tier of coaches in the country. He did exactly what other teams need to do as the blueprint for winning a national championship and winning your conference, which is dominating high school recruiting by going after athletic defensive linemen and stout offensive linemen, and then using the transfer portal to supplement in individual positions, but not leaning on it too much. In an era where we have seen Mike Norvell and Lane Kiffin falter because they have relied too much on the transfer portal, Dan Lanning is the man who's doing it right. So Lanning deserves a ton of credit. The way that he got his team up, despite being rusty in the previous weeks in various areas, they played a near perfect football game. It's hard to do that. The whole stadium was rocking. Everything was going in the direction. And I have to give all that credit to Dan Lanning.
You can't give up 31 points and play a damn near perfect game. I get what you're trying.
Hold on. Wait. Come on, man. That's one of the best offenses in the country. Dude.
But you said a damn near perfect game. A perfect game is a shutout. I mean, like, let's just be honest. I mean, come on.
I think you're taking me a little too literal.
Oh, I am taking you a little too literal. But listen, when I look at this game, went back and watched it, the whole thing again today, you talk about Dan Lanning, and I'm not going to take that shine. I do want to get to Ryan Day in a moment, but I want to start with the winner. I want to start with Oregon. Joe, it's Dillon Gabriel, man. And I think that there comes a place in time. I don't want to get in the debate with you here because we got a lot to talk about, of really good college quarterbacks that make big-time plays and big-time moments in big-time games. What do you want me to talk about? The 27-yard run for a touchdown when he's running away from people, or the ball placement that he has to Evan Stewart that is absolutely elite? Like, this guy made all the big plays. He took some hits, got right back up. Joe, the God's honest truth is that they played their best game in the biggest moment, but their quarterback played the best game that he had in the biggest moment. Look, I did not know if Oregon would be able to line up with the offensive line that had been struggling, that would be able to run the football. Because, Joe, let's call it what it is, man. They had been struggling running the football. I know the week before James and the company got things going, but before that, they had really had moments where they had struggled in the run game. Joe, they attacked one of the best secondaries and made them look I don't know.
Pedestrian. They made him look like a JV squad.
I don't want to say pedestrian because I do think that they got out schemed and were in bad positions because of scheme. But they have everything that you need. The O-line played good. They ran the ball. And here's the thing, man. I felt like going and rewatching the game in crucial moments, when James is carrying the football, when Dillon Gabriel pulls it and runs it for a touchdown or throws it over the middle on a crucial third down, I felt like the hunger was there for one team more than the other. Now, I get it. You know, the game's away. Ohio State's got to go across the country. It's a tough environment to be in, and they lost by a point. I don't want to take anything away from Ohio State. I still think they're a really good football team. But I think the difference in this game, whether you want to however you want to slice it or dice it, comes down to how Dillon Gabriel played. I mean, look, man, Joe, going into the fourth quarter, he was completing 85% of his passes on third downs. I mean, like, there comes a part where I think he's getting better in the system, and him being who he is with the playmakers that he had outside. Joe, let's call it what it is. At Oklahoma last year, this kid did not have the playmakers on the outside than what he does right now. Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is that's one point that we actually, or at least I remember I brought up one of the weeks, and actually maybe it was when we were arguing and you were disagreeing with me. But the point that I had made is that the offense is going to not look great immediately because you have a new quarterback coming in and trying to learn that system and get to know his guys. It was perfect timing that this was the week that they finally felt like they were playing together as a team, and instead of all the miscues and the misfires. So it's part of the process. You were less doom and gloom than some other people. There were plenty of other people in the national landscape that were really starting to doubt Oregon's capabilities.
You couldn't ignore. Let's call it what the truth is. It's a reason why you picked Ohio State to win this one too. You couldn't ignore the lack of running game. You couldn't ignore the lack of miscues and mistakes. And look, Dillon Gabriel threw 2 picks last week. I mean, like, as much as I'm praising him, okay, they were a little erratic the week before. But Joe, them being able to run the football on that defensive line is insane. I mean, look, they pushed them around. They were faster to the edge. They got the crucial yards up the middle. And Joe, we'll talk about this with Ohio State because I said that they had a guard problem. I think Lanning outcoached them, moving in some smaller guys into the interior on guards. Like Trayvon Henderson had the fumble where it got stripped from him. Like, dude, I had been preaching. Joe, how many times did I said Ohio State has a guard problem?
Well, we were specific that the issues at right guard, I believe.
But I said both, and I got yelled at. But the bottom line is that they schemed up so many different things on Ohio State that, to your point about Dan Lanning, I talked about Dillon Gabriel. Dan called a fantastic game. Look, let's call it what it is. He's going to have his hands on the defensive side of things. But even things that they were doing defensively, I thought were crucial in where they stood. They did a very great job in how they schemed things up. And here's another thing. They had a big key player out defensively. So, I mean, look, man, they were beat up, Birch out. They have guys that need to come in. They scheme things up, and they were able to take advantage. I want to throw this out there too. Joe, I had been wondering when Evan Stewart was going to make an appearance.
Yeah.
Okay. He had kind of been all over the place. He hadn't been getting his touches. Joe, the dude went off. I mean, 7 catches, 149 yards, and a touchdown. The touchdown he had was purely insane. I just think that they have so many weapons, the way that they can attack you. They're very tough to scheme at the current moment offensively if that's how they're going to look.
I don't know how to make sense of this, but one of the craziest stats that comes out of this game is that Denzel Burke on 8 targets allowed 8 receptions for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns. They kept going after him because they realized he couldn't keep up with him. And look, a lot of people are saying that, like, oh, Denzel Burke sucks. He's cooked. He's still a very athletic football player, but I wonder, does he bounce back from this? Like, what does this mean for Ohio State down the line? Because our team's going to try to recreate this. I think it's the inverse. I just think that Evan Stewart, who had this 5-star caliber talent that never had really come to full fruition, finally came to its full moment where we saw it show up on the field. We saw him make the plays that we knew that he can make, which is making these tight catches and creating separation in short areas because he's quick. He's got great long speed. I was impressed, which is something that I didn't know he was even capable of. He's a lighter guy. I think he's like 180 something, and he was still able to win in those tight spots over Burke. I'm not saying this to take anything away from Dillon Gabriel. I agree that he had a fantastic game, but I would argue it's not just Dillon Gabriel who won this football game. I think that the whole team played so well together. I know. That's why I'm saying that, like, I didn't think that's what you were implying. It's just that I think that the whole team worked together so effectively is why they were able to beat Ohio State. And it comes down to Josh Simmons goes down with the injury, who is this budding star at left tackle for Ohio State. And Mateo Uiagalelei starts cooking. And he had a huge game, the young guy on that defensive line filling in for
critical third down stop. TFL, I thought was very critical. Look, man, they were, like you said, they were beat up. They had some issues, but they overcame them. Look, I'll say this for Dan, okay? You asked me in the offseason a very specific question about if I had to start a program, what coach would I take? And I said Dan Lanning. This is why. I think that he's molded different. The way you talked about how he built the program is 100% correct. But, man, I got to flip it on the inverse for just a quick second, Joe. Got to read this off to you. Ryan Day is 2-4 in bowl games. He's 1-3 against Michigan. He's 1-7 against top 5 opponents. And he's 0-3 against the SEC. I mean, like if Dan Lanning would have lost this football game, I mean, early in the career of his tenure, I think people would have been like, yeah, okay. I mean, like they were supposed to lose. Dan, they're still coming on. I got to be real with you, man. I'm starting to question, like, hey, everybody pointed to a big game Dan Lanning not winning any. But then I look at Ryan Day saying he's 1-7 against top 5 opponents. That's not good.
Well, and you also look too at like the misfirings in the final 5 minutes of this game where they should have won it and they should have been able to finish the game out with how good their roster was. And they completely let the game slip away from them. That 1000% falls on Ryan Day's head. I'm not going to sit here and say that Ryan Day's cooked, he's done. Like I'm not going to say that.
No,
but
because they're going to get in the playoffs and they're going to make a run. And
right.
I mean, come on.
This does start a conversation, though, that we can't ignore. If they don't win the Big Ten championship game, and if they don't go on to, if they don't win the Big Ten championship game, there's a chance that they might miss out on the playoffs, but I don't think that that's likely.
10-2 Ohio State team's not missing the playoff.
If they get bounced, no, they'd be 10-2. If they get bounced,
no, they'd be 11-2 because if they don't lose,
you're right. If they get bounced in the first or second round of the playoff, I would argue that there is going to be serious frustration from Ohio State fans. And I don't know what that result is. Like, I don't know. I know that certain fan bases are far more impatient than others. I know Ohio State fans have this national championship expectation. And it might not come to fruition this year. But one thing is worth bringing up. One thing that we say a ton on the show. Oregon fans aren't going to love this. It's hard to beat a good team twice.
Yeah, very much so.
To Ohio State's benefit to lose to Oregon the first time and then to win the Big Ten championship game and to then get the bye in the playoff.
Well, the question would be, Joe, if they played tomorrow in a neutral field, who would you take them? I think that's the argument a lot of people, come up with. I think it's hard to say that you wouldn't take Oregon. And look, on-field stuff has to matter. If we're going to go to Ohio State here, this is what I'd say. Number one, I thought you got away from the running game a little too quickly. Look, to be honest with you, I think Will Howard is a very serviceable quarterback. And look, I'm not going to get in this debate with you. I thought he did enough for you to win the football game.
Yeah, I didn't agree with that when we were texting. Yeah. That was my whole statement, is I think he did enough. But again,
here's where I'll go. I think he did more than enough to win you the football game. And let me tell you why. Because, Joe, there were moments and times in that game in the second half, Oregon was putting 5 guys in the box and they didn't adjust. TreVeyon Henderson literally had 8.7 yards per carry. Joe, outside the long run that he had in the first half, they should have continued on some of these drives. I get that they were going off in the passing game in moments, but you're literally running the football for 7 yards a carry in the last 20 plays, Joe. They threw the ball 18 times.
I know that I understand that you're saying that, yes, some of the play calling does come down on Chip Kelly, and some of the decisions that he made in the end of this game were not good. They were not setting them up to win. But my whole take is still not wrong that I had the whole offseason that I had in this week coming into the game that Ohio State fans got so upset over, which is that Will Howard is a good enough of a player to connect with his very gifted elite skill players to deliver them the football. But when I got a call on him with the game on the line or, needing to climb back into a football game, he's just not that guy. And I'm not that's not me trying to be negative. That's not me trying to say this guy sucks. That's not what I'm saying.
To rudely interrupt you, okay? If I would have came into this game and said, listen, if I would have told you on Thursday that Will Howard would have 330 passing yards and 3 total touchdowns, what would you have said? Be honest with me now.
I texted you this. He is somebody who is a stat sheet champion. He's a guy that his numbers will always look freaking good. But then when we actually watch the games and evaluate it, it's not as impressive as it sounds.
Joe, I mean, he continued to go back to his playmakers. I mean, the God's honest truth is they got to make crucial stops. Hold on. This is what, if any Ohio State fan disagrees with this, then I'm sorry. Here's the truth. You can't let guys like Dillon Gabriel, who's not the fleetest of foot, get out in the open space and run the football.
Stop doing this. Stop doing this. We're not talking about Dillon Gabriel. We're not talking about the run defense.
Page. If you'll let me turn the page, I'm trying to turn the page.
Okay.
The truth is about Ohio State. You bragged about your front seven all year. You bragged about your secondary play. You bragged about your safety play. The God's honest truth was you got run all over. And Joe, the game plan, Oregon never got away with it from the running game, ever. They continue to pound you in crucial situations to continue to maintain drives. Ohio State massively got away from that. Again, you can blame Will Howard or whatever we want to do, but the God's honest truth is
I'm not blaming Will Howard.
That front seven in the second half got pushed around. Now, you can blame whatever you want, but when I look at the second half and you have 85 yards rushing put on your head, that's a problem.
It certainly is, and that was one of the complete polar opposites of what we talked about in the preview the entire week, which is that Ohio State's front seven was supposed to be so talented that it was supposed to effectively remove Oregon's rushing attack and that they'd have to throw the ball too much. Yeah, I think that the biggest issue to take away from this game for Ohio State for the rest of this year is that your defense did not step up to the plate when they're supposed to be the backbone of your roster.
No doubt.
Your run defense, you're supposed to have Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoila are supposed to be two of the best run defending edge rushers in all of college football. Tyleik Williams is supposed to be this monster in the inside. And that was what I said all week on every radio spot that I did. But none of that showed up. And maybe some of that goes on Knowles. Like, I don't know. I think a good bit of it does have to go on Jim Knowles because they didn't look ready. They looked out-coached, out-efforted, out-schemed, out-prepared.
No doubt. And that's what ultimately lost them the football game. And look, Joe, even in the critical moments, like, so Oregon kicks a field goal at the end of the game to go up by 1, right? If you go back and watch it, they ran 3 minutes off the clock when they got inside their own 20. 3 minutes. So again, Dan Lanning said, look, I have enough faith in what I do and my team to make the stop. And ultimately they did. One team made the stop, the other didn't. And look, I'm not going to put that on Will Howard. We can talk about the PI call. It is what it is. But the God's honest truth is one made the stop and the other didn't. And that's what, like, it comes down to those crucial moments, those crucial situations. And I got to say this too. You got run all over, but here's the truth. They went in on Quinshon Judkins. Judkins had 11 carries for 26 yards. They bottlenecked him. They put multiple guys extra guys in the box to stop him from running the football. And Joe, I think Chip Kelly, for what it's worth, got scared to go back to it. Joe, if you can't line up in 3rd and 2 and run the football, if you're too scared to do that, then I don't know what to tell you. I thought that this would be a different Ohio State team than what it is. And here's the truth. You had not been tested before you faced this football team. Even though Oregon had not necessarily been tested, the truth was they had their backs up against the wall against a Boise State team that they had to kick a field goal. Adversity had struck their program already. You have a quarterback that's been in these type of situations before that overcame them. Now, Joe, I don't know what you make of this team. I still think that they're a really good football team. I'm not writing them off in a 1-point loss on the road. Just not going to happen. But what I will say is, if you don't clean up that front seven, and especially in some of the run deficiencies, you're going to get beat.
Yeah, they have to play better football. And to their advantage, there's a long stretch of their schedule that's pretty weak. I still think Ohio State
go to Happy Valley in 4 weeks. I mean, Joe, that's the only time that they'll get tested.
Yeah, I think that they still beat Penn State with that next matchup that they have, the next tough matchup for a while. But they got to get right before they play Oregon again, assuming that they can finish this year out strong and be in the Big Ten championship game. Their season's not over. It's 1,000% nowhere near over. And I don't think anyone should paint it as such. Those are two of the best teams in the country, 2 top 3 teams. I might not even move Ohio State that far back. Like, might move them to 2 and move Oregon up to 1. Like, that's probably how my power rankings are going to end up looking.
I can't do that because, Joe, here's the truth. There are going to be teams, and there are teams that can run the ball more effectively than Oregon and have better offensive lines. I don't know if I can do that right now. But look, like you said, it's a long season. Let me ask you this before we turn the page here. Was that pass interference on Jeremiah Smith?
You can't extend and shove a defensive back. It's not It's not like he ran into him and then came back to the football. You can't
Look,
shove and then come back to the football. It's
agree.
OPI.
I saw Ohio State fans blaming Will Howard for sliding. I get it's a dumb Dak Prescott type of move here. Brother, you're in 3rd and 25. I mean, like, once you're in that situation,
it's got to have better awareness than that, man.
Okay,
like,
fair. But you know what? I'm going to say this.
Throwing the ball away is better than him running.
But I'm going to say this and move on. Okay. James had 115 yards on them. That's not on Will. And like you said, everything that Ohio State had coming into the season, you told me that you had one of the best front sevens in the country, and you got run all over. That's the God's honest truth.
Okay, but that's deflecting from the conversation of, did Will Howard fail to succeed in the situation where he needed him to? Did he make a wrong decision? Yes, he did. That is his fault. BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your #1 source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.